Hi, welcome to today's video, and there's been a little bit of progress. I've decided I didn't like the way I'd done the servos on the turnouts originally. Now I'd used this design which came from Thingiverse, which worked well, but the problem, because I've used 1-inch thick foam, by the time it comes through it's not easy, and if you ever have to change the servo for any reason, it's a nightmare getting the rod back into the turnout. So I've been changing it to, I've removed some of the foam so I can place the servos now under the diorama, which I can lift out easily. So if I ever have to get to them to work on them, that's now been done. So in this section here has been done, and I'm working in this section here now. So that's sort of taken me a little while to come up with a decent design I'm happy with, and I think I've reached that now. Obviously the Mimic panel is still being configured, obviously because I'm using the roots. Now I normally would do this within JMRI and that seems working well, but I spoke the other day with David in an email, and what he suggested is maybe we make a slightly different node that would basically not require JMRI for setting the roots. So in this particular Mimic panel, there's basically 1, 2, 3, 4 points that are affected. So we would have a node that we can teach for, or to send, when I press the button it would send out the 4 events required, slightly staggered, so there was never a big mad rush of current going for moving each of the servos. So that's something that's been mentioned. I have also been working on a sketch I showed probably earlier last year, where I was looking at the 4 aspect signal, which then developed into an Arduino Mega node, which was going to have, I think it was something like 140 actions for 60 odd outputs. That was going to be for the Mimic panel. Now I did have an issue on that node with the MCP2515, I think I damaged it, or it was a faulty unit, or it maybe have even been the Arduino Mega was the issue. So obviously now, because I've moved over to the SP32, I've now just completed testing of a 16 channel or 16 pins output node, which I've allocated 60 actions. And by actions I mean you can teach each pin a number of different effects that I can use. Now this will come in handy for a number of things. You can use it for signals or simple animation within buildings. So that one hopefully will be rolled out onto the GitHub repository in the next few days. I'm just writing up the documentation for that node. So that's looking good. As I say, I think one of the next nodes might be a 16 input. Now the reason I've gone for these 16 channel nodes is we can do that with just an ESP32 and a transceiver. So if we're getting the ESP32s around £2, £3, depending on the postage, and getting them from AliExpress or whatever, by the time you've got the shield and the transceiver, now it becomes a nice cost effective node. It's even cheaper than having the MCP, which does give me an extra 16 channels, or an extra 32 if I had an extra one. So in different locations from different end users, because that's what we're aiming it for, the end users have different options available to them. So I say that's why I've been sort of doing that. So for the last 2 or 3 days I've not actually done much up on the layout. I say I have done a little bit of configuration. I just need to now get the turnouts, so when they move they work the LED. So I'm not using JMRI to actually do that, which in the past I would have done. So LCC is doing that all by teaching other nodes. I can report it back to JMRI, so it will show up on the panel. But what I'm finding at the moment, yes, I've got a small monitor here I use to look at, which is when I'm configuring. But if I'm playing on the layout, really I don't want to be looking at that monitor, you know. And if I've got Mimic panels here, there or wherever, because having reused this Mimic panel, I have another Mimic panel that was in Williston Station that one will possibly need a number of MCP to make it work. I can get that up and running a lot quicker because I've got a lot of work to do to make the desk complete, to put the Mimic or the larger Mimic panel that will control the whole layout. Now the advantage of using routes, you know, I can set a route here, I can set it on the big Mimic panel or wherever on the layout, so I can control, you know, small turnout. But you know, that just sets it here. Once we, you know, I within scripting I can set the routes as well, so I'm not tied to, you know, if I just had that each button doing one turnout, there'd be a lot more buttons, but it would be not as user friendly in my opinion. So I'll show you basically what I have been doing here, and as I say, hopefully in the next few days, as I say, I've taken a break for a day or two while I really needed to think about how I want to do the next stage. You know, having built this layout a number of years ago, and yes, I had it running, obviously I've still got a lot of scenic work to do. I thought this time let's take a little bit, you know, take a step back, think about it, and let's do this once now and finish that section. So where I was hoping to have this section finished a lot quicker, it's now taking me a little longer. I do know how I'm going to do the spot detection, that won't take me long. It's just the Mimic panel and then getting this one in here. Once I've got this bit here complete, obviously the final section here, you know, I've got one turnout and a number of sensors I would need to work in. I do have signalling in this section, and I have got the signals here at the moment. I've still got to think about this area, what type of signals, whether I go for ground signals, and I'm not a signalling railway person, so I don't really know. I did think of having some ground signals, which I believe will use more for shunting or local, and I don't know if that's the way to go, or whether I design some, or I bought the signals I use now. I think they were coming in around £4 from TMC in the UK, you know, for a 2 aspect. I could go for some 3 aspect and 4 aspect on this layout, but I think it would be a little bit of overkill for myself. But you know, the idea is with a lot of these codes I'm making available, you have the choice to use them for, you know, if you want 2 aspect, 3 aspect or 4 or whatever. You know, you could possibly even use feathers if you're prepared to buy the feathers and whatnot. But there's so much cost involved in doing these things. You know, you really have to think about it. You know, if I to do signals around here, I'm probably looking at £120 to buy all the signals that I would like. I have got a box, I've already bought a number of them, but they're slowly getting to the point where think about getting it right. And I'm also thinking I'd like to have it where I can play a signalman in a, you know, signal box and control the layout that way, and then you drive the locos as per the signals. This is something I've never done before. You know, it was not something I thought about when I was building the layout. For me, it was about having a computer doing automation and me just driving the odd little train around. So there's a lot to be involved and thought about to get that right.